The desert wind howled like a distant lament, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth through the cracked windows of a rundown diner on the edge of nowhere. It was the kind of place where truckers nursed black coffee and locals whispered about ghosts from the old mining days. Inside, the neon sign flickered erratically, casting erratic shadows across the Formica tables. At one corner booth, a small boy no older than 8 huddled against the worn vinyl seat, his thin frame shaking not from the chill, but from something deeper, more primal, fear etched into his wide, tear-streaked eyes. He clutched a faded toy truck in one hand, the other tracing invisible patterns on the table, as if mapping an escape route that didn't exist. The boy had wandered in alone an hour earlier, his sneakers caked in red dust, clothes rumpled and too big for his slight build. The waitress, a weary woman named Clara, with lines carved deep around her mouth, had spotted him from the counter. "Hey, kid, you lost?" she'd asked gently, sliding a glass of water his way. But he only shook his head, mumbling something about waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Whispers rippled through the diner, folks exchanging uneasy glances. In these parts, children didn't just appear out of thin air, not without trouble trailing behind like a storm cloud. Outside, the gravel parking lot stretched empty under the merciless afternoon sun, save for a lone Harley rumbling to a stop. Its engine growled low, a thunderous heartbeat that silenced the diner's chatter. The rider killed the ignition, the sudden quiet amplifying the creak of his leather jacket as he swung a leg over the bike. He was a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered and weathered, with salt and pepper hair tied back in a ponytail and a face mapped by scars, faint ones along his jaw from a long-ago bar fight, deeper ones hidden in the shadows of his grey eyes. Ethan Hale, they called him, though he'd left that name behind years ago, buried it with the dog tags of a brother lost in some forgotten corner of the world. He wore the patched vest of the Iron Vow Motorcycle Club, the emblem a snarling wolf encircled by a chain, gleaming dully on his back. It was a promise etched in ink and blood. Loyalty above all, no man left behind. Ethan pushed through the diner's door, the bell jingling like a warning. He scanned the room out of habit, his boots thudding softly on the linoleum. The air smelled of grease and stale cigarettes. But something else caught his nose, a child's quiet sobs, muffled but insistent. His gaze landed on the boy, and time seemed to slow, the way it did before a crash on the open road. The kid looked up, their eyes locking in a moment that stretched taut as a wire. Ethan froze midway to the counter, his calloused hand hovering near his pocket where he kept a crumpled pack of smokes. The boy slid from the booth, approaching with hesitant steps like a fawn testing solid ground. He stopped inches away, his small fingers reaching out to brush the edge of Ethan's vest. The touch was feather-light, reverent, as if the fabric held some sacred power. That's my dad's club," the boy whispered, his voice cracking on the words. His fingertip traced the wolf's outline, the patch worn from years of wind and wear. The Iron Vow. He used to tell me stories about the rides, the promises they made under the stars. Ethan's world tilted. He dropped to one knee, eye level now, the diner's hum fading to a distant roar in his ears. The boy's face, round cheeks smudged with dirt, eyes the color of faded denim, struck him like a punch to the gut. It couldn't be. Not here, not after all this time. "What's your name, son?" Ethan managed, his voice rough as gravel, betraying the storm building inside. "Lucas," the boy replied, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "My dad's name was Jacob. He rode with you guys. Said you'd always come back for family." The words hung heavy, laced with a desperation that clawed at Ethan's chest. Jacob. The name echoed like a ghost from Ethan's past, pulling up memories he'd chained away. Late-night rides through canyon shadows, oaths sworn over flickering campfires, a brother-in-arms who'd vanished one rainy dawn 5 years back, leaving only rumors of a botched deal and shadows closing in. Ethan's hand trembled as he placed it on the boy's shoulder, the weight of it grounding them both. Around them, the diner patrons watched in hushed awe. Sensing the invisible threads weaving tight, Clara hovered nearby, her apron twisted in her hands. "Kid's been here since noon," she murmured. "Said his pa dropped him off, promised to circle back. But the hours ticked by, and nothing." The truth hit Ethan like the kick of his bike's starter. Jacob wasn't coming back, not alive. Whispers from the club's edges had reached him months ago. A rival crew, crooked badges turning blind eyes, a man caught in the crossfire of old vendettas. Ethan had pushed it down, focused on the road ahead, but now this child, this living echo, demanded reckoning. A promise forgotten, resurfacing like a submerged wreck breaking the surface. He pulled Lucas into a gentle hug, the boy's small frame fitting against his chest like a missing piece. The scent of dust and innocence mingled with the leather of his vest. "Your dad's club," Ethan echoed softly, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "We're family, kid, and family's got a way of finding each other even when the road gets dark." Tears welled unbidden in Ethan's eyes, spilling silent down his weathered cheeks. He didn't sob or wail, he simply déshabillé, collapsed inward, the weight of unspoken grief crashing through the walls he'd built. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in bloody streaks, Ethan stood, lifting Lucas effortlessly onto his hip. The diner erupted in quiet applause, a ripple of humanity in the face of raw emotion. But Ethan knew this was just the spark. Word would spread through the Iron Vow like wildfire, phones buzzing in distant garages, engines revving in response. A forgotten oath stirred to life, binding them all in a ride toward justice, redemption, and the fierce loyalty that defined them. Outside, Ethan strapped the boy into the sidecar he'd jury-rigged years ago for just such emergencies. Ironic how life circled back. The Harley roared to life, its vibration a promise of motion, of answers. As they pulled onto the highway, the desert unfolding like an endless scroll, Ethan glanced at Lucas, who clutched the vest patch like a talisman. This child, this sign, would unite the crew once more. Not for vengeance, but for honor, for the man who'd ridden beside him, and the legacy that refused to fade. The road ahead twisted into twilight, headlights piercing the gathering dusk. Ethan gunned the throttle, the wind whipping tears from his face. Promises survived the miles, he thought, and tonight they'd ride to keep one alive. The twilight bled into night as Ethan's Harley carved through the winding blacktop, the engine's rumble a steady pulse against the encroaching dark. Lucas clung to the sidecar's edge, his small hands white-knuckled on the leather strap. The wolf patch now tucked safely into his pocket like a secret weapon. The desert air rushed past, cool and sharp, carrying the faint tang of creosote bushes blooming under the stars. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but his mind raced ahead, to the Iron Vow's compound, a sprawl of weathered barns and floodlit garages tucked into a forgotten valley 2 hours north. It had been his anchor for 15 years, a fortress of rusted iron and unbreakable bonds, where men like him traded war stories for the solace of shared silence. Headlights from an oncoming semi-truck sliced the gloom, momentarily illuminating Lucas's face. Pale but resolute, the fear from the diner softened by the motion of the ride. "You think they'll remember me?" the boy asked, his voice barely audible over the wind, cutting through the roar like a needle. Ethan glanced down, his grip tightening on the handlebars. "They'll remember your dad, kid. Jacob was the heart of us, the one who pulled us through that dust storm in 18, when the rains turned the canyons to rivers. He made promises that stuck like glue on your boots after a mud run." Memories flickered unbidden, Jacob's laugh echoing around a campfire, his steady hand clapping Ethan's shoulder after a close call with border patrols. They'd been brothers forged in the fires of old runs, smuggling hope more than contraband, standing against crews that preyed on the weak. But 5 years ago, Jacob had peeled off on a solo ride, chasing whispers of a score that could set them all straight. He'd never returned, leaving a void that Ethan had filled with endless miles and empty bottles. The compound's lights appeared like beacons on the horizon, a constellation of yellow glows against the velvet sky. Ethan eased off the throttle as they approached the chain-link gate, its barbed wire glinting under the moon. A lone sentry, Ryan, a wiry vet with a prosthetic leg from his army days, stepped from the shadows, shotgun slung low but eyes sharp. He recognized the bike's custom exhaust before Ethan's face, flipping the gate open with a nod. "Hail, been a spell. Who's the passenger?" "Family," Ethan replied simply, rolling to a stop in the gravel courtyard. Engines hummed in the distance, bikes cooling after an evening patrol, and the air hummed with the scent of motor oil and charred mesquite from the communal fire pit. Lucas scrambled out, staring wide-eyed at the cluster of Harleys lined up like soldiers at rest, their chrome catching firefly sparks from the overhead lamps. Word spread fast in the Iron Vow. It always did. By the time Ethan guided Lucas toward the main barn, a converted silo with walls papered in faded club photos, a half-dozen members had gathered. There was Noah, the club's quiet enforcer, his tattooed arms crossed over a barrel chest, and Andrew, the mechanic with grease-stained fingers and a perpetual squint from years under hoods. They eyed the boy curiously, murmurs rippling like wind through dry grass. "This is Lucas," Ethan announced, his voice carrying the weight of command he'd rarely used since Jacob's disappearance. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the slight tremor there. "Son of Jacob Hale, no relation, but blood all the same. Found him alone in a diner off Route 17. Said his pa dropped him, promised to loop back. But Jacob's not coming, brothers. Not after what the shadows took." The barn fell silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl. Noah stepped forward first, his face hardening as he knelt to Lucas's level. "Jacob's boy. Hell, kid, we rode with your old man from the beginning. He patched me in after that wreck near the border, saved my hide when the doc said otherwise." He extended a massive hand, and Lucas took it tentatively, the contrast stark. Calloused palm engulfing tiny fingers. Andrew hung back, wiping his hands on a rag, but his eyes glistened. "Last I heard from him, he was chasing leads on that crooked sheriff up in Blackridge. Said it was personal, something about protecting folks from the inside out." Ethan nodded, the pieces clicking like a lock tumbler. Blackridge. A dusty town 2 counties over, where whispers of corruption festered like open wounds. Jacob had confided in him once, over whiskey by the fire, talk of badges on the take, families torn apart by false arrests, a web of power that crushed the honest underfoot. "He made a vow," Ethan continued, his tone low and fervent, "to us, to the road, to keeping the innocent clear. This boy's proof he held to it till the end. We ride for answers tomorrow. Full crew, no badges, no games, just truth." The men exchanged glances, an unspoken pact sealing in the air, thick with loyalty. Ryan clapped Ethan on the back. "Count me in, for Jacob, for the kid." Lucas looked up at them all, the fear ebbing as he saw the fire in their eyes, not rage but resolve. The kind that built empires from ashes. One by one, they shared fragments of Jacob, stories of midnight rescues, stands against rival gangs poaching territory, the quiet honor that defined the Iron Vow. It was a family ritual, weaving the boy into their fold, mending a tear 5 years old. As the night deepened, they settled Lucas in a spare bunk with a blanket that smelled of pine and leather. Ethan sat nearby, watching the boy's chest rise and fall in sleep, the toy truck clutched close. Outside, engines started sporadically, scouts heading out to scout paths, phones buzzing with calls to distant chapters. The compound stirred like a beast awakening, drawn by the pull of an old promise. Ethan stepped into the cool air, lighting a cigarette under the stars. The smoke curled upward, mingling with his thoughts. Jacob hadn't just vanished, he'd left a trail, one that led straight to the heart of betrayal. And now, with Lucas as the living spark, the iron vow would follow it to the end. Dawn crept in slow, painting the valley in soft greys. Ethan felt the weight of eyes on him as he prepped his bike, more riders arriving, silhouettes against the rising light. 30 strong already, vests patched and faces set. Lucas emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and climbed into the sidecar without a word. "We're going to find out what happened," Ethan said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Your dad would want that. Honor the vow." The convoy formed, a thunderous line stretching into the mist. As they rolled out, the ground vibrating beneath them, Ethan led the way, the road unfurling like a challenge. Justice wasn't a shout, it was this, silent wheels turning toward the light, carrying the echoes of promises that refused to die. The wind whispered through the spokes, carrying them north toward Blackridge and whatever truths lay buried there. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The sun climbed higher as the Iron Vow convoy sliced through the morning haze, a serpent of chrome and leather uncoiling along the cracked asphalt of Highway 44. Dust devils danced in their wake, swirling red earth like fleeting spirits disturbed from slumber. Ethan led the pack, his Harley purring steady, Lucas secure in the sidecar with a borrowed helmet too big for his head, the visor flipped up to let him watch the world blur by. Behind them, the rumble of 29 engines formed a symphony of resolve. Tires humming over potholes, exhaust popping like distant gunfire. Noah rode flank on a battered Indian, his eyes scanning the horizon for tails. Andrew brought up the rear, toolbox strapped to his saddle like an arsenal of truth. Blackridge loomed in Ethan's mind, a speck on the map turned festering sore. It was the kind of town where the sheriff's star gleamed too bright, bought with whispers and backroom deals, where honest folk vanished into the night like smoke from a dying fire. Jacob had spoken of it in hushed tones during those long hauls, his voice laced with a fire Ethan hadn't seen since their first ride together. "They're preying on the weak up there, brother," Jacob had said, the campfire crackling between them. "Families split, kids left to fend. We can't let it stand." That vow had pulled Jacob away into the shadows of undercover whispers, leaving Ethan to wonder if honor was just another word for a grave. As the miles melted, the landscape shifted, sagebrush giving way to jagged mesas, their faces scarred by old quarries. Lucas shifted in the sidecar, his small voice cutting through the wind. "What if they're not nice to us? The people in Blackridge." Fear edged his words, but there was steel beneath. Forged in the diner's loneliness, Ethan glanced down, the road's vibration thrumming through his bones. "Nice ain't what we're after, kid. We're after right. Your dad taught me that. Stand tall, even when the ground shakes." He thought of Jacob's last ride with the club, pulling a stranded family from a flash flood, no questions asked. That was the Iron Vow's creed, promises kept in the quiet hours when the world turned its back. The convoy crested a rise and Blackridge sprawled into view. A cluster of sun-bleached buildings huddled against a dry riverbed, the sheriff's office a squat brick fortress at its heart. They rolled in slow, engines throttling down to a growl that turned heads in the streets. Folks paused mid-stride, a mechanic wiping sweat from his brow, a woman with a laundry basket on her hip, eyes widening at the influx of vests and beards. No aggression in their approach, just presence. A wall of silent intent that spoke louder than shouts. Ethan signaled a stop at the edge of town, near a weathered gas station where pumps stood like rusty sentinels. The crew dismounted in unison, boots crunching gravel, forming a loose circle around Lucas as he hopped out. Ryan scanned the rooftops, his prosthetic clicking softly as he shifted weight. Feels off, Hale. Too quiet for midday. Before Ethan could respond, a dust-choked cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing lazy warnings. Out stepped a deputy, mid-30s, paunch straining his uniform. Badge pinned crooked like an afterthought. He eyed the group with the wariness of a man who'd seen too many shadows. "What's this? Some kind of parade? We don't take kindly to outsiders stirring dust in Blackridge." Ethan stepped forward, hands visible, voice even as desert wind. "No stirring, deputy. Name's Ethan Hale, Iron Vow. We're here for a friend. Jacob rode with us. Heard he had ties here. Looking for word on what happened." The deputy's face twitched, a flicker of recognition, or was it unease, crossing his features. "Jacob?" "Yeah, I recall the name. Passed through a while back, asking questions that didn't need asking. Got himself mixed in trouble. Best you turn around. Town's got its own ways." Lucas edged closer to Ethan, clutching the toy truck like a shield. The boy's eyes locked on the deputy, and something unspoken passed, a child's intuition piercing the facade. "My dad said men like you forget promises," Lucas said softly, the words landing like pebbles in still water. The deputy stiffened, but before he could retort, Noah loomed forward, his presence a quiet storm. "Kid's got a point. We're not here for trouble. Just answers. Jacob was family. Made a vow to protect folks from the inside. If Blackridge swallowed him, we'll know why." Murmurs rippled from the gathering townsfolk, a few nodding subtly. The deputy glanced around, sweat beading despite the dry heat, then waved them off. "Fine. Check the old mill by the riverbed if you must, but watch your step. Accidents happen." He climbed back into the cruiser, tires spinning dirt as he fled toward the station. Ethan watched him go, the pieces shifting in his gut. Accidents. The word tasted like lies wrapped in tin. "Split up, brothers," he said low. "Noah, Andrew, take the mill. Ryan, scout the edges. Rest of us hit the streets, ears open, no badges, no fights, just listen." As the group dispersed, Ethan knelt to Lucas. "Stay close, son. This town's got secrets, but so do we." The boy nodded, slipping his hand into Ethan's, the touch a tether amid the uncertainty. They walked the main drag, the sun beating down like judgment, shadows lengthening under awnings where locals whispered. At a corner cafe, a grizzled old-timer with a faded Iron Vow tattoo peeking from his sleeve caught Ethan's eye. He beckoned them over, voice a rasp over steaming coffee. "Jacob was here, all right," the man said, glancing over his shoulder. "Stirred the hornet's nest. Sheriff Kane's got the town in his pocket. Shakedowns on the poor, framing the outspoken. Your boy uncovered papers. Proof of bribes from some big city outfit pushing folks off their land. Tried to get it to the right ears, but they cornered him. Signs of a scuffle at his last known spot. Then nothing. Body never found, but the whispers say he didn't walk away clean." Ethan's jaw tightened, the air thick with the scent of burnt oil from a nearby garage. Corruption, raw and rotting, just as Jacob had feared. "Kane know we're here?" The old-timer chuckled bitterly. "Word travels fast. Expect company. But for Jacob's sake, and that kid's dig deep, honor like his don't die easy." Across the street, Noah and Andrew returned from the mill, faces grim. "Place is a ghost," Noah reported. "Overturned chair, papers scattered like confetti from a bad party. Suggests resistance, but no blood, no traces. Jacob put up a fight." The sun hung high now, baking the truth into the open. Ethan felt the crew's eyes on him, loyalty burning steady, a chosen family rallying around the lost. Lucas squeezed his hand tighter, the wolf patch bulging in his pocket. This wasn't just a search. It was redemption's first turn, promises clawing back from the dark. As distant sirens wailed, a warning or a trap. Ethan straightened, the road's call echoing in his veins. They'd peel back the layers, layer by layer, until justice breathed free. The iron vow didn't break. They bent the world to fit the vow. The midday sun scorched Blackridge's main street, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage that distorted the edges of reality. Ethan moved through the crowd with Lucas at his side, the boy's hand a small anchor in the swelling tide of suspicion. The air hung heavy with the acrid bite of overheated engines and the faint underlying rot of unspoken fears, secrets festering in the cracks of this forsaken town. Townsfolk averted their eyes, but whispers trailed them like exhaust fumes. The bikers were here, the iron vow, ghosts from Jacob's past stirring the dust. They paused at the edge of the dry riverbed, where the old mill silhouette loomed like a broken promise against the sky. Noah and Andrew had returned empty-handed, but their report lingered in Ethan's mind. Scattered papers, an overturned chair, echoes of a struggle that ended in silence. No body, no closure, just the hollow suggestion of violence swallowed by the desert. Ethan knelt by the riverbed's lip, sifting through sun-bleached pebbles, the grit embedding under his nails. "Your dad was tough, Lucas," he said, his voice low, carrying over the distant hum of the convoy's idling bikes. "He didn't go down easy. We're gonna honor that." Lucas nodded, his fingers tracing the wolf patch in his pocket, the fabric worn smooth like a worry stone. The boy's eyes, sharp despite the innocence, scanned the horizon where the riverbed snaked toward the town's outskirts. "He told me stories about places like this, said bad men hide in the shadows, but good ones light the way." The words struck Ethan deep, a reminder of Jacob's quiet wisdom, the kind that bound the club tighter than any chain. Ryan approached from the flank, his limp barely noticeable on the uneven ground, prosthetic leg whispering against the dirt. "Scouted the perimeter, Hale. Sheriff's got patrols circling like vultures. And that deputy's cruiser? It's parked outside the Old Timers Cafe now, lights off but engine running. They're watching." His eyes flicked to Lucas, softening for a beat. "Kids holding up better than some of us vets after a bad op." Ethan rose, dusting his hands, the sun glinting off his vest's patches like badges of unyielding resolve. The iron vow had faced worse, rival crews in moonlit ambushes, storms that tested the soul, but this felt personal, a corrosion eating at the core of what they stood for. Corruption wasn't just a badge. It was a betrayal of the thin line between order and tyranny, the kind Jacob had sworn to cross for the forgotten. "We push on," Ethan decided, his tone steady as the road's endless pull. "Head to the sheriff's office. No guns, no threats, just questions. Let 'em see we're here for truth, not blood." The group reformed, a phalanx of leather and steel striding toward the squat brick building at the town's heart. The sheriff's office squatted like a watchful beast, its windows tinted against prying eyes, a flag limp in the still air. As they neared, the door swung open and out stepped Sheriff Kane himself, tall and broad, with a moustache like twisted wire and eyes cold as riverbed stones. His uniform strained at the seams, badge polished to a mocking shine. Flanking him were two deputies, hands hovering near holsters, the air thickening with the scent of gun oil and tension. Kane's gaze swept over them, lingering on Ethan and then dropping to Lucas, a flicker of something, recognition, guilt, crossing his face before hardening. "Hale, right? Word gets around quick in Blackridge. You and your road dogs stirring up old ghosts. State's got no record of this Jacob fellow causing trouble, but if you're looking for handouts, turn tail." Ethan stepped forward, hands open at his sides, the sun casting long shadows that danced like accusations. "Not handouts, Sheriff. Answers. Jacob rode into your town 5 years back, chasing leads on shakedowns, bribes that tear families apart. He was one of us, made a vow to stand for the right, left his boy behind, thinking he'd loop back. We know he uncovered something big. Papers from that big city outfit pushing folks off their land. What happened to him?" The sheriff's laugh was a dry bark, echoing off the brick walls, but it didn't reach his eyes. Kane shifted, boots scraping gravel, the sound sharp as a warning. Vows? That's outlaw talk. Jacob poked where he shouldn't, asking about my operations, stirring folks with tales of injustice. Got himself in a bind with some rough types passing through. Scuffled at the mill, then poof, desert swallows its own. No bodies turned up, and that's the end of it. Now, you got no jurisdiction here. Best ride out before I find reason to detain you for loitering. Lucas tugged at Ethan's sleeve, his voice small but piercing the standoff like a clear bell. You're lying. Dad said men like you forget the promises they make to protect people. He was gonna stop you. The words hung in the heated air, drawing murmurs from the gathering crowd. Shopkeepers pausing, a mother shielding her child's eyes. Kane's face flushed, veins standing out on his neck, but he reined it in, glancing at his deputies. Watch your mouth, kid, Kane growled. But Ethan placed a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder, the boy's defiance fueling his own. The sheriff leaned in closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Jacob thought he could play hero. Dug into records, found ties to developers greasing palms for water rights. But he crossed lines, broke into my office, they say. Resistance met force. If there's more, it's buried deep. For your sake, leave it. Noah tensed beside Ethan, fists clenching, but a subtle shake of Ethan's head held him back. This wasn't the time for fists. It was for the slow unraveling of lies, the moral weight pressing down like the relentless sun. Andrew, ever the thinker, piped up from the rear. We talked to folks. Old-timers remember Jacob had proof, documents showing bribes, false arrests to clear land for outsiders. You let it happen, Sheriff. For what? A cut of the pie? Kane's eyes narrowed, the facade cracking just enough to reveal the rot beneath. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, reinforcements or a bluff, and the crowd shifted uneasily. Proof's thin as desert air. You want justice? File a report in the next county. But cross me, and your little club's vow turns to dust. He turned on his heel, deputies following, the door slamming shut like a gavel. Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension coiling tighter in his chest. Lucas looked up, eyes wide, but unbowed. He knew Dad was right. I can see it. The boy was right. Kane's unease was a thread to pull. As the convoy regrouped at the gas station, phones buzzed with updates from scouts, whispers of hidden files in the sheriff's safe, a witness in the shadows. The Iron Vows network hummed alive, loyalty bridging miles like invisible chains. Ethan lifted Lucas onto the bike, the engine's warmth seeping through his jeans. We're not done, son. Your dad's promise lives in us. We'll dig till the truth breaks free, no matter the cost. The sun dipped toward afternoon, casting golden hues over the mesas, but the shadows in Blackridge grew longer, promising a night of revelations. Engines roared to life, the convoy a rolling testament to chosen family, thundering toward the edges where secrets hid. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was the ride itself, fierce and unforgiving, bound by honor that outlasted the dark. If you felt the weight of this promise pulling at your heart, hit that like button now. It fuels these stories of honor and the roads we ride together. The afternoon shadows stretched long across Blackridge's parched streets, turning the town into a labyrinth of half-hidden truths and flickering doubts. Ethan guided the convoy to a derelict motel on the outskirts, its neon sign long dead. The parking lot a graveyard of cracked concrete overgrown with stubborn weeds. The air carried the sharp tang of ozone from an approaching storm, clouds gathering like unspoken accusations on the horizon. Engines cut off one by one, the sudden silence amplifying the creak of cooling metal and the distant rumble of thunder. Lucas dismounted the sidecar, his sneakers kicking up puffs of dust. The toy truck now joined by a small notebook Ethan had given him, pages filled with the boy's scribbled questions about his father, a child's map to the unknown. Inside the motel's dim lobby, the clerk, A gaunt woman named Grace, with eyes hollowed by years of watching strangers come and go, eyed the group warily, but said nothing as Ethan paid for rooms in cash. The iron vows spread out, claiming the upper balcony like sentinels, vests slung over railings that overlooked the riverbed's skeletal remains. Noah and Ryan took first watch, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light, while Andrew tinkered with a radio in the corner, tuning into static-laced frequencies for any chatter from the sheriff's patrols. Ethan settled Lucas on a sagging bed, the room smelling of mothballs and faint mildew, a single bulb casting warm pools over the faded wallpaper. "You holding up, son?" Ethan asked, sinking onto the edge of the mattress, his leather creaking softly. The weight of the day pressed on him. The sheriff's evasion, the old-timers' warnings, the invisible noose tightening around Jacob's memory. Outside, wind whispered through the motel's eaves, carrying the first fat drops of rain. Lucas nodded, but his fingers twisted the wolf patch, the threads fraying under the pressure. "I keep thinking about what Dad would do. He said promises aren't just words. They're the road you take when no one's looking." The boy's voice held a quiet conviction, echoing Jacob's lessons, and it stirred something fierce in Ethan, a reminder of the vows that had bound them all, to protect the vulnerable, to stand against the tide of indifference. Jacob had embodied that, pulling Ethan from the abyss after his own brother's death overseas, forging a family from the wreckage of war and wanderlust. A knock rattled the door, sharp, insistent. Ethan rose, hand instinctively brushing his belt where a knife hung hidden, and cracked it open. Grace stood there, rain-dampened shawl clutched tight, her face pale under the hallway's fluorescent hum. "Didn't mean to intrude," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the empty corridor. "But I overheard your talk about Jacob. He stayed here once, 2 rooms down. Left in a hurry, papers under his arm. Said he had proof, ledgers showing the sheriff's cut from those land grabs, developers from the city, buying up water rights, evicting folks with fake warrants. Jacob was going to expose it, get it to an honest judge upstate." Ethan's pulse quickened, the pieces slotting together like gears in a well-oiled machine. "Why tell us now? Kane's got eyes everywhere." Grace's eyes darted to Lucas, softening with a maternal ache. "Because of the boy. Jacob spoke of him, showed me a photo, promised he'd be back to take him riding. Men like Kane forget the cost of families like yours. He runs this town like his kingdom, but the rot's spreading. Last week, another family got pushed out, kids left without a roof. If you need more, check the crawl space under room 7. Jacob hid a cache there, before they chased him to the mill." She slipped away as quickly as she'd come, vanishing into the rain-slicked night. Ethan closed the door, the lock clicking like a vow sealed. He gathered the core group, Noah, Andrew, Ryan, in the adjacent room, the air thick with the scent of damp leather and brewing storm. Maps unrolled across a rickety table, marked with scribbles from scouts, patrol routes, blind spots, the sheriff's fortified office. "Grace gave us a lead," Ethan said, voice low and deliberate. "Jacob's proof is close, but digging it up means risking Kane's wrath. We do this clean, no breaking, just truth. For the kid, for the families he's crushed." Noah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his tattooed knuckles whitening. "Clean's fine till it ain't. Kane's not playing fair. Why should we bend over for his rules?" The question hung, a moral fork in the road, testing the Iron Vows code. Andrew adjusted his glasses, grease smudged on the lenses. "Because that's what sets us apart. Jacob didn't fight dirty. He lit the dark with honor. We get the ledgers, leak 'em wide, no blood on our hands." Ryan nodded, his prosthetic leg tapping a steady rhythm. "Agreed. But scouts say patrols are doubling. We move at dusk, under cover of rain. I'll cover the approach." The plan took shape, a tapestry of loyalty woven tight. Noah and Ethan to retrieve the cache, Andrew to decode any documents, Ryan on overwatch. Lucas, though eager, stayed behind with Grace's promise of hot cocoa, his role not in the shadows, but in holding the light of why they rode. As twilight bled into storm, the rain hammered the motel's tin roof like impatient drums. Ethan and Noah slipped out the back, hoods up, boots silent on the mud-slick ground. The crawl space under room 7 yawned like a secret mouth, cobwebs veiling the entrance. Ethan dropped to his belly, the earth cold and yielding, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Spiders skittered from the light, and the air reeked of damp rot. But deeper in, his fingers brushed metal, a waterproof case, locked but yielding to a pick from his kit. Inside, yellowed ledgers, scribbled notes in Jacob's hand, photos of evicted homes, families huddled in the dust. One page stopped Ethan cold, a letter unfinished addressed to Lucas. "Son, if the road takes me, know the vow's your shield. Keep the promise. Stand for the right, no matter the storm." Tears blurred the beam, mixing with the rain seeping through cracks. Noah pulled him out, the case clutched like a relic. Back in the room, Andrew pored over the contents by lamplight, the storm raging outside. "It's ironclad," he murmured. Bribes dated back years, Kane's signature on falsified evictions, developers' payoffs tied to missing persons, including hints at Jacob's end, signs of aggression at the mill, covered up as an accident. The revelation hit like thunder, the moral weight crashing down. Ethan looked to Lucas, now asleep in the corner, the wolf patch over his heart. This wasn't vengeance. It was justice's slow burn, redeeming Jacob's sacrifice by shielding the innocent. But sirens pierced the gale. Kane closing in, drawn by whispers or instinct. The convoy stirred, engines priming in the downpour, a family united against the flood. Ethan gripped the case, resolve hardening like forged steel. The vow demanded more than retrieval. It called for confrontation, a stand under the storm's fury, where promises faced the tempest and emerged unbroken. Word rippled through the iron vow like lightning, time to ride out the lies, toward dawn's unyielding light. The rain lashed harder, but so did their bond, carrying them forward on roads etched with honor. The storm unleashed its full fury as the iron vow mobilized under the motel's sagging eaves, rain sheeting down in silver curtains that blurred the line between sky and earth. Ethan clutched the waterproof case like a sacred relic, its edges digging into his palm, the weight of Jacob's unfinished letter burning in his mind. Thunder rolled overhead, a cosmic drumbeat echoing the pulse of engines firing to life, Harley's snarling defiance against the deluge, headlights piercing the gloom like defiant stars. Lucas stood close, rain dripping from his oversized helmet. Eyes wide but steady, the wolf patch now pinned to his jacket like a badge of belonging. The boy had woken to the commotion, his small frame silhouetted in the doorway. But there was no fear left, only the quiet fire of a promise inherited. Noah revved his Indian, water spraying from the tires as he circled the lot. Kane's cruisers are inbound, 2 blocks out, lights cutting through the rain. We hold the line here or bolt. His voice cut sharp over the gale, the club's enforcer ready to shield with his bulk, but Ethan's gaze swept the group. Andrew sealing the ledgers in a saddlebag, Ryan checking his shotgun's chamber, not for use, but presence. The rest of the crew forming a ragged perimeter, vests slick and shining under the floodlights. This was chosen family at its core, veterans and wanderers, bound not by blood, but by oaths whispered in the dead of night, now tested in the storm's roar. "We hold," Ethan decided, his words carrying the gravel of certainty. "No running from truth. Jacob faced this down alone. We do it together. Get the case to Andrew's bike, safe, dry. Then we meet Kane head-on. Words first, brothers. Let the evidence speak." The plan was simple, poetic in its restraint. Present the proof to the sheriff under the cover of witnesses. the townsfolk roused by the thunder and the growing hum of justice. No fists, no fire, just the unyielding light of exposure, the moral hammer that shattered corruption without a single blow. The convoy tightened ranks as the cruisers skidded into the lot, tires hydroplaning on the muddied concrete, sirens wailing a futile protest against the downpour. Sheriff Kane emerged first, rain plastering his hat to his skull, mustache drooping like wilted wire. His deputies fanned out, flashlights sweeping arcs of accusation, but the iron vow stood unmoving, a wall of leather and resolve that turned the motel's facade into a stage for reckoning. Grace hovered in the lobby window, her silhouette a silent ally, while shadows stirred in nearby rooms, locals peering out, drawn by the electric tension crackling louder than the lightning. Kane's boots splashed forward, stopping short of the line, his face a mask of bluster cracking under the strain. "This ends now, Hale. You're trespassing on my turf, stirring ghosts that should have stayed buried. Hand over the kid and whatever nonsense you've cooked up, or I'll haul the lot of you for obstruction." Water streamed down his uniform, pooling at his feet, the badge on his chest dulled by the wet, a symbol tarnished long before the rain. Ethan stepped to the fore, case in hand, Lucas at his side like a shadow of purpose. The wind whipped the document's edges as he flipped the latches, revealing the ledgers under the beam of a club member's headlamp. Pages fluttered like captured breaths, ink smudged but legible, dates of payoffs, signatures linking Kane to the developers, falsified warrants that had evicted families, scattered homes like chaff in the wind. Jacob's notes scrawled margins, observations of shakedowns, hints at the mill's shadowed end, where resistance met a cover-up veiled as accident. "This is what Jacob found, Sheriff," Ethan said, voice steady as the earth's core, rising above the storm. "Proof of your kingdom built on broken backs, bribes for land grabs, innocent folks framed and forgotten. He came to stop it for the vows we all make to protect the weak. You silenced him, but his words live here. And now, so does the truth." The sheriff's eyes darted to the pages, color draining from his face as thunder punctuated the silence. Deputies shifted uneasily, one lowering his light, the beam catching Lucas's unblinking stare. The boy stepped forward, rain mingling with the tears on his cheeks, but his voice rang clear, a child's honesty slicing through the adult facade. "Dad said promises like yours are lies that hurt people. He kept his, for me, for everyone. You can't hide anymore." The words landed like hail, stirring the crowd that had gathered under awnings, murmurs swelling into a chorus of long-suppressed outrage. A woman clutched her shawl, whispering of her own lost home. An old man nodded, the faded tattoo on his arm echoing the vow's emblem. Kane's bluster faltered, his hand twitching toward his radio, but Noah's presence loomed, a quiet giant blocking retreat. "Call it in if you want," Noah rumbled, rain tracing paths down his scarred face. "But the state's coming. Andrew's already scanning these to a contact up north. Clean badges who don't bend. Jacob's light exposes the rot. We just carry the torch." Ryan added from the flank, his tone even, prosthetic steady in the mud. "No fight here, Sheriff, just consequences for the families you scattered, the vows you broke." Lightning forked the sky, illuminating Kane's defeat. The moment truth pierced the armor of power. He sagged, the fight leaching out like the storm's fury, ebbing, replaced by the hollow echo of accountability. "It wasn't personal," he muttered, voice lost in the wind, but the lie crumbled under collective eyes. Deputies holstered weapons, one stepping back as if burned, the tide turning not with violence, but the inexorable pull of justice's gravity. The sheriff waved them off, retreating to his cruiser, the engine coughing to life in surrender. Sirens faded into the night, leaving the lot to the vow and the rain's cleansing rhythm. As the storm softened to a drizzle, the crew gathered close, the case passed hand to hand like a benediction. Ethan knelt to Lucas, pulling him into an embrace that smelled of wet leather and sage, the boy's small frame fitting against the scars of years. "Your dad would be proud, son. He kept his promise, through us, through you. The iron vows your family now. We'll ride it out together." Lucas nodded, the wolf patch glinting under the emerging moon, a symbol of bonds reforged. The club erupted in quiet cheers, backslaps and shared nods weaving redemption's thread. Jacob's legacy not in vengeance, but in the light he'd ignited, burning away shadows for generations. Dawn broke clear over Blackridge, the desert air crisp and renewed, carrying the scent of wet earth and possibility. The convoy rolled out at first light, engines humming a victory song, ledgers secured for delivery to those who could wield them true. Ethan glanced at Lucas in the sidecar, the boy's smile breaking free like sunlight through clouds. The first real one since the diner. Promises survived the tempest, Ethan thought, etched deeper than any scar. They thundered south toward the open road, a chosen family unbreakable, honoring the silent vows that defined them. Justice wasn't an end, it was the horizon, always calling, always kept. Thank you for riding this journey with us. Stories of honor and heart like these thrive on your support. If the vow of loyalty moved you, subscribe now and join the Iron Promise family. Hit the bell for more tales from the road, and let's keep the promises alive together.